Okay, my name is Steve Kaufmann. Okay, I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I'm interested in languages. When you say my origins, I was actually born in Sweden. At the age of 5, my family moved to Montreal, so I grew up here in Montreal. But then I worked in Asia for a long time. I worked in Asia for 12 years, and then settled in Vancouver. Most of my career I was in the lumber business, and the last 10 years I've been very much involved with language learning as a learner myself, and also with the website that I've developed with my son called LingQ. So it's become a passion here in my, my 60s and early 70s. I'm into languages. So, all right, as a 5-year-old I came to Montreal, speaking only Swedish, although my parents are from Czechoslovakia. And my parents said, we're in Canada, now we speak English. So we only spoke English at home. So essentially I forgot Swedish very quickly. Obviously we had French at school in Montreal, but in the 50s in Montreal there was the English part of the city and the French part of the city. We didn't learn much. But at the age of 16 I got very interested in French, with the result that I went to France. I studied there for 3 years, became, I would say, fluent in French. And that gave me the confidence that I could learn other languages. And I think that's an important point. Once you've learned one language, people who have never achieved fluency in another language, they don't have that experience, they don't have the confidence that they can do it. So then I did that. I was hired by the Canadian Diplomatic Service, who sent me to Hong Kong to learn Mandarin Chinese in 1968. And then I lived in Japan, so you know what, after I learned 3 or 4 languages, then I figured, hey, this is fun, I can do more of this. So that's really how I got interested in languages during my professional career. And then in the last 10 years, as I became aware of MP3 technology, the internet, just the way so much language content and functionality was available in ways that they were not available 50 years ago, I just got all excited and I learned, Russian and Portuguese, you name it. Now I'm on to Arabic and Farsi by way of Korean, Romanian, Greek. It's fun. Right now, LingQ is a passion. I wouldn't say that I'm making my living from LingQ, but it's hanging in there. But certainly, I lived in Japan. My knowledge of Japanese enabled me to get a very good position with a Canadian, in fact with 2 Canadian companies that were exporting lumber to Japan. It enabled me to develop a level of contact with the Japanese lumber trade, not just the trading companies where they speak English, but right down to the level of, wholesalers and builders and stuff, which was invaluable to me. And then I was able to set up my own company based on the contacts that I had in Japan, based on my knowledge of the Japanese market, my ability to read the trade press, and all of that stuff. And similarly, in Europe, I had supply from Sweden, we were doing business in Germany, in France. So throughout my career in the lumber business, the way I look at it is, you don't have to have languages, but when you have languages, your opportunities increase tremendously. And everything is all about opportunities, The more opportunities you have, one of them is going to be good, right? So, I learned Mandarin in 9 to 12 months. The other people took them 2 years, and they didn't learn it as well. And the reason is that I read so much. Everything I could get to listen to, I would listen to. So I exposed myself to so much more than the other students. The other students sat in class, did their assignments, and that was it. I would go, and of course in those days you didn't have the online dictionary, so I had to buy basically readers which had the vocabulary behind each lesson. And initially they were sort of books for intermediate, whatever you might call them, graded readers today, but then right very quickly into real stuff, literature, historical stuff, with the vocabulary list, and I just massively read and listened. And I remain convinced that the way you learn languages is to basically ingest, take in as much of the language as you can. Not so much what you say, but how much you get into you. Okay, so LingQ has been around for about 10 years. And right now it's significantly better than it was when we started. So we've constantly been improving it. Because the issues are, one, how to capture as much interesting content as possible. So we have content in our libraries. We now have the ability to scrape news sites and bring them in. You can bring in audiobooks to bring in as wide an array of content as possible. And then we have a range of functionality that helps you learn from that content, and things that make it convenient, like you're studying something on your iPad, you can put it in a playlist, you have it available to listen to on your iPhone, so you've got the listening, the reading all tying in. And we try to put things in there that are a little bit motivating, like statistics on your progress and so forth, so that we keep people at it. Because the key thing in language learning is to keep people going. So we hear, of course, Stephen Krashen, who I consider to be a genius when it comes to explaining how languages are learned. And I totally subscribe to what he says, and I did before I had ever heard of Stephen Krashen. But he basically summarizes it, he explains it in such a good way. And so to him, comprehensible input. We learn from comprehensible input. But there's obviously a contradiction, because when you start in a language, it's not comprehensible. So how do you get the comprehensible input? And so there I talk about sort of several stages in our learning. When we start out, we kind of pick our way through it, one word at a time, and we forget, and we listen again, and we still don't understand, and we struggle. However, in the initial stages, we are so motivated to try to get a handle on this language. How does this language work? What do the words mean? When does one word end and the next word begin, right? I mean, those are some of the basic things that you're trying to discover the language. So you're very motivated. So actually, quite uninteresting stuff in the initial stages can be quite compelling. Because you're like, well, how does this stupid language work? You know, like me with Farsi right now. It's that. However, comes a point where you can't listen. Like once you understand something, you can't listen to it 20 times. Like I've listened to Arabic or Farsi 30, 40 times the same story, and I keep on having the same places that I don't understand. But I'm motivated to try to understand those things, right? But once you get to where you understand stuff, you can't listen 20, 30 times. You might listen once or twice. So I think we start out with the sort of compelling input. We're motivated by the desire to get at least a toehold in the language. And once we achieve a certain level, then we can't do that anymore. We need to have interesting stuff that we're now learning. For example, if I'm learning about Arabic history, I'm motivated to learn about Arabic history. I'm almost not aware of the fact that I'm ingesting the language. I'm learning new words. So then that's where the comprehensible and compelling. So it's compelling for different reasons. Initially, it's compelling simply because we want to try to get a feel for the language. Subsequently, it's compelling because it's interesting in and of itself, I would say. And I should add, too, that one of the wonders of learning a language is, so whatever it was, Ukrainian, Arabic, it doesn't matter. A place on the map, on the globe, you've seen it there, you don't know much about it beyond what appears in the news. Once you start learning the language, then you get very interested in learning more and more. And all of a sudden, those places come alive. Greece, Romania, you know, all of a sudden, they have more meaning. So it's in many ways a wonderful experience. So I have a channel called lingosteve on YouTube. And twice a week, I put out a video, mostly in English, because most people have, you know, prefer that. I occasionally do videos in other languages, which invariably people say, why can't we have subtitles and blah, blah, blah. And it's a lot of work. So I can't do that. So essentially, we mostly in English talk about language learning, and the blog, it covers some of the same ground. And so I like to share my experience, which really is just enjoy the process. You know, I overheard your previous guest here talking about being in a desert when you're at the intermediate level. I don't share that view. I see it more as a cross-country skier. So you've climbed the early steep part, now you're in the flat part, and it's great. You're just gliding and you're enjoying the countryside, and so you're using the language that you are now good enough in that you can do interesting things in it. So that's good. And there is no final goal. There is no language that I speak that I couldn't speak better. I'm not going to, you know, torture myself over the fact that, and certainly some of my weaker languages, like I did Greek for 6 months and I stopped. We went to Crete, I used my Greek. Okay, I can go back to it. So am I going to try to become perfect in Greek? I'm happy with my Greek. It's not a desert. I'm happy. But now I'm also happy discovering Arabic and Farsi. I would say half my languages, if I more or less, let's say I am familiar with 18, I can quite comfortably speak 10. There's another 5 that it would only take me an hour or so of warming up and I could be okay. And then there are the ones that I'm discovering now, which is Farsi and Arabic, and I think my Romanian is pretty rusty. But yeah, half of them since the age of 60. I wrote a book when I was just a little younger than 60, which was called The Linguist, a Language Learning Odyssey, which was translated into Chinese, and we published it in China and Taiwan and stuff. And at that time, I spoke 9 languages, and now it's 18. So more or less in declining order of proficiency. And bear in mind that you may have a larger vocabulary in language A, understand language B better, and speak better in language C. So it's not really comparable, but by and large, so English obviously, English, French, Japanese, Mandarin, and Spanish. Those I consider my best languages. And then I go maybe German, Swedish, Italian, Portuguese, maybe Russian. So those are still okay. Then and Cantonese is not bad. But then I get into Ukrainian, you know, sort of Czech, Polish, Slovak, which we're sliding a bit. Korean, I wish I were better in Korean. And then I get to the ones where I have a familiarity with the language. I can understand it to some degree, but I can't really say that I speak it. And that's Greek, Romanian. No, Greek I actually did quite well when I was in Crete. But Romanian, and even when I was in Romania, I did okay, but then I've been away from it, right? So, and then we have Arabic and Farsi. Most English speakers don't know the meaning of the word polyglot, okay? Most English speakers think the word linguist means someone who speaks many languages. And in fact, the #1 definition in the Oxford Dictionary for linguist is someone who speaks many languages. So there has been an evolution, at least in our world, the polyglot world. We think everyone knows us as polyglots, but actually the average person doesn't know what a polyglot is. And so when we had Polyglot Symposium, I thought that might be a little bit of a tough sell beyond our in-group. And one of my concerns always is that we should get beyond the sort of dedicated polyglots. We should get the average person who many people would like to speak another language, but they don't see themselves as polyglots. So we changed the name to LangFest, which I think is a good thing. Now, and I say this all the time, the most important thing in language learning is the attitude of the learner. So you have to want to learn. You have to be confident that you can learn. You have to believe that what you're doing, that learning that language, is worthwhile doing, so that you enjoy it while you're doing it. That degree of commitment is extremely important. Now, someone, as I said, who has never learned another language to fluency doesn't really believe that they can do it. You have to accept the fact that you can do it, okay? You also have to find ways of doing it that are enjoyable. So if you have a book that you don't like, a teacher that you don't like, a method that you don't like, forget it. Find yourself a method, a book, a teacher, or no teacher that you like. Personally, I like listening and reading, and I think listening and reading is very powerful. Of course, I like to speak whenever I get the chance, but for me, the measure of how I'm doing is not whether I'm suddenly able to say something in the language, but how well do I understand? How much can I read? How much do I understand when I listen? And if I build up these skills, then I know that the speaking will come. So enjoy yourself, focus on comprehension, believe you can do it, and enjoy the process.